I'm Ethan Janney. We are about to get started. I'm going to let in our live Zoom participants as well. Hello, everyone joining. What's going on, Rip? What's up, Steven? Great to see you guys. Thanks for joining us today. We will get started momentarily with our guest today, Aïda Lahlou. And yeah, this is Piano Tech Radio Hour. If you haven't been before, I'll let you know what it is. Stick around if you're on the socials and YouTube and Facebook, and find out how you can join us on the Zoom call maybe next time. So yeah, this is Piano Tech Radio Hour. And what we do here is we gather every Saturday to meet with and learn from the most fascinating and knowledgeable folks in the piano world. It could include manufacturers, rebuilders, musicians, makers of other instruments, and of course, piano techs. Our mutual goal is to become better at our crafts, to help each other.
Bless you.
Oh my goodness, I'm trying to stop that sneeze. Might have another one coming. To help each other and to create an ever more musical world together. Piano Tech Radio Hour is brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, an online learning resource that brings you cutting-edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. You can find out more at pianotechniciansmasterclass.com. You can also subscribe to Radio Hour, just $16 a month, to get direct access to each week's private Zoom call, as well as all the archival recordings of over 200 episodes in our member area. Join using the link bit.ly/join PTRH. That's bit.ly/join PTRH. We have a podcast audio only version of the program, which you should check out. We've reached top 100, top 10, even #1 status in various locales in the performing arts category of iTunes. You can also find us in Substack with a blog that brings you insightful information you just can't find anywhere else about pianos, their history, their construction, fine details of the work itself. And so you can check us out on Substack. Just search for Piano Technicians Masterclass. And then, of course, we have our socials, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and the email list, which you can access at the website with pianotechniciansmasterclass.com. Just get your name and email entered, and you'll stay up to date on the latest with the radio hour and the master classes. Okay, so let's talk about our guest today. Our guest, as I said earlier, is Aïda Lahlou. She's a pianist, performer, and creative thinker whose work opens up so many fascinating directions for conversation, from international concert stages to entrepreneurial arts projects, from classical interpretation to improvisation. Her musical life reflects a constant curiosity about how artistry connects to the wider world. Aïda, welcome to Piano Tech Radio Hour.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a delight to be here.
Wonderful. Why don't you start by sharing with the audience where you're zooming in from today?
Sure. I am currently in Oxford in the United Kingdom. This is where I live. Yeah.
And is this your background? Where are you from originally?
So I'm actually from Morocco, which is not a country you'd necessarily associate with classical piano, let alone classical music.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's a pretty unusual country to be from as a classical musician.
Tell us the story of how someone like you finds their way from a small child in Morocco to a professional musician in Oxford, England.
Sure. So like many of my peers, I would say, as a young child, I started piano lessons when I was around 5. But you know, it's the kind of thing that everyone kind of did. Everyone who's a bit privileged, like I did, and was lucky enough to do extracurriculars. You'd usually do something like dance or piano or something. But I was very lucky to find a Ukrainian teacher, Yana Kaminska, who really was such a good fit for me. She understood my motivation for music, and she also used the fact that my family, although not musical, was very into classical music. So she used the fact that I had this kind of library of sounds in my ears that perhaps other children didn't have. I was listening to, say, Glenn Gould recordings or Martha Argerich recordings in the car going to school. And she used that to kind of motivate me. And then she actually signed me up for competitions, which is something that my mom and my parents in general were a bit unsure about at the beginning, because that can put a child off. But I actually really enjoyed competitions. And when I started doing well at them, it became a motivating factor to get better and better. Fast forward to when I was 15, and I was at the stage where I was starting to get into sort of the professional area of piano playing. I was already doing public concerts and so on. But on the other side of it, I was also very academically driven. So I kind of had to make a choice at 15, because on the one hand, I wanted to pursue a very academically driven sort of career and go to very good universities or something. On the other hand, I was given the opportunity to attend the Yehudi Menuhin School, which, for listeners who might not know it, it's a young artist school, I would say, from ages 8 to 19 in the UK, founded by the great violinist Yehudi Menuhin, which is very, very selective and takes children from all over the world to try and learn their instrument at the highest level. So I kind of had to make that decision to pursue piano at that time. Because, as many of you listening will know, piano is a very competitive field, and there is kind of an age limit to that. So whereas I could always go to university later, let's say, piano, you kind of do have to do it in a timely manner if you want to accede to the highest echelons. So that's what I did. After that, I read music at the University of Cambridge. And after that, I completed this education with something a bit more concrete on the instrument by going to the Guildhall School of Music and Drama for an instrumental music master's, whereas the Cambridge degree was a bit more academic with instrumental performance as an optional add-on. The Guildhall degree was very much focused on performance. So that's kind of how I went from a kid just having piano lessons to being considered, a professional pianist with qualifications and so on. All the way through this, I also did concerts, and we can maybe talk about that, but that's broadly speaking, my journey to date.
All right. Well done.
Thank you.
Let's listen to a little bit. Let's start with something bite-sized here. So this is track number 6 from your most recent album, Mirrors and Echoes. Why don't you tell us briefly about the album and the track number 6, which is For Piano Moods, Andante Cantabile.
Sure. So this album was my first solo album. It was released in September last year. It's a bit of I describe it as a bit of a journey and a reinterpretation of Maurice Ravel's masterwork Miroir. So we're taking the Miroir 5 movements, and then we're interspersing them with lesser known miniatures from around the world. And this track, the For Piano Moods number 1, is written by Alexandre Tanzman, who was a friend of Ravel's, actually. He's got Polish origins and then traveled to Paris and then the United States. So he's a very interesting composer, and I think you will hear in it glimpses of like film music, kind of echoes of jazz, and definitely French influences. It's a very short piece. Hope you like it.
All right. Yeah. So this will be audio only, but we'll take a listen, and it's just about a minute. So let's see here. Here we go.
that is
Wrong track. Wrong track.
yeah, different track.
Let's take a pause. Why don't you describe this track? I just
So
hit the
this,
wrong button on Spotify.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
no
Well, then
worries.
we'll continue.
So this is actually by Maurice Ravel. The track you just heard is Une barque sur l'océan, which is the third movement of Miroir. So this is actually by Ravel. And the title translates to a small boat on the ocean. So it's a wonderful depiction of water and also the changing nature of being on the ocean. So it starts very peacefully, and then suddenly you'll see the weather changing and the storm starting.
All right, let's get back into it. Here we go. All right, just a little taste of that one. I have to say, it's got a little bit of that Clair de Lune type of feel to it, right?
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
mhm,
So this is Ravel and Debussy were kind of, well, they were at the same time period, and a lot of people compared their music as kind of similar, but
mhm.
they were very much of the opinion that they were very different. And
Of
but of
course.
course, all French music has this sensuality that is very, very characteristic. So definitely, I agree with you on that point.
So, tell us a little bit about, working with Ravel's music and how that sits in the context of all the background that you explained. Do you remember your first encounters? Do you remember, you know, maybe a musical history class, a piece that another, pieces that you studied along the way and how that kind of led to doing so much with his music on this album?
Sure. Well, as a pianist, I think everyone has some exposure to the music of Ravel. But as a beginner pianist, you don't really get to play his pieces very much because even though he himself was not a very good pianist, and he got into a lot of trouble at conservatoire for that, I think he was actually kicked out of conservatoire because he was not good enough of a pianist. His pieces are some of the most difficult pieces to play.
Mm,
And so, as a beginner pianist, you wouldn't necessarily perform them. However, they will be in your imaginary as a sort of North Star of things to aim for. So, if you hear things like La Valse or Alborada del Gracioso or other pieces that he wrote that are absolute masterpieces, but extremely difficult to play. Or Scalbo comes to mind as well. Scalbo from um, uh, I forget the name. Oh, this is really bad. I forget the name of the opus, but Gaspard de la Nuit. That's it. Yeah, Gaspard de la Nuit. Um, these pieces are extremely difficult, both musically and technically. My first contact as a performer, though, was at the Menuhin School when my teacher asked me to learn probably one of Ravel's most abstract pieces, which is Noctuelle, which is the first movement on the Miroir opus. And it's extremely weird because what it's supposed to depict is the flight of insects at night. So nocturel translates to moths. And so what you hear is Ravel's attempt at giving you these glimpses of very disorderly moths kind of jamming into each other and traveling through the night's air. And it results in a very, yeah, in a way, it's a very abstract, difficult work. And that was my very first exposure to Ravel as a performer, age 15. But instead of feeling, at a loss with this piece, I actually was very motivated by learning this very difficult work. And I was so motivated that over the next 5 years, I actually learned the entire opus of Miroir, which is, again, it's one of the most significant, let's say, opuses for the piano that Ravel wrote. Yeah, so that was my first contact with Ravel. Did you ask something else about how it led to the album? Sorry, I forgot.
Yeah, just kind of the general. I was curious, how that, because you mentioned a lot of your educational history, and from performance to kind of study of music and whatnot. Yeah, I was just curious the context of coming to this point. But yeah, you've covered enough unless there's anything else you feel you would like to share. We will listen to something else in a moment. I did want to ask you, given that you're from Morocco, and you sort of speak the French better than I do, at least. I don't know, you must speak some French, if
Yeah,
not
French is,
well.
yeah, it's basically native. Yeah.
Yeah. I've never been to Morocco. Would love to go. Such an
I
interesting
should.
place where you have a mix of all of these influences, from European, France, Spain, Africa, do you feel like at this point in your career you're bringing any of that to bear in your artistry, or has that not awakened yet? We've talked to several people on the program, especially couple times, right? Maybe somebody will move to New York from Turkey or, something like this. And that's when they start getting in touch with their native music because they're like, oh, I don't have that here. And now that it's becoming their part of what they want to express as they live in a different place or sort of develop. How does your origin play a role, if at all,
No, I
culturally?
think it plays definitely a massive role. And I would say that it did from day one. So it's not like I'm one of these people who later incorporated my heritage. As you said, Morocco is extremely cosmopolitan. It has influences from France through colonization, of course, but also from Spain, from Africa. We have a very rich history, which meant that Morocco was a sort of cultural hub for a lot of scientists and intellectuals in the Middle Ages. So in addition to, our own, let's say, Muslim traditions, we also have traditions of music that come from like the Jewish tradition or the Christian tradition. So all of that is a fantastic heritage to draw on. And actually, in the album, there's little bits of all of these things and more. And I'm lucky to work with Ravel as a sort of connecting thread for all of these because he was a cultural chameleon with his music. He wrote music from other countries better than pretty much the people from the countries themselves. You wouldn't be able to tell he was just a French guy writing
Hmm.
in his house because it sounds so authentic. And so it was very easy kind of filling in the gaps and creating this wonderful tapestry of music from all over. I mean, if you look at the album, I have music from Azerbaijan, music from 14th century Andalusia, which is kind of the area in Spain that was under Moorish influence, French music, Spanish music, Spanish infused music. So it's really kind of a huge melting pot. And that's probably because I had this kind of multicultural sort of awareness from the moment I was born.
Now, what All right, I have another question, but let's listen to this. Let's go back to this uh for the four piano moods piece here, which we can listen to in its entirety. Um, I guess we'll just hit play here. Any other little last minute notes you want to make before I
No,
try it out?
that's just this is Ravel's friend, so we're talking 20th century.
Okay.
Very short, very sweet.
Okay, let's check it out. Oh, gotta get the volume up. Very nice. Some very buttery chords there. Quite a
Yeah,
lot
but
of notes.
I
Do you have
love
enough
that
fingers to play all those notes? I don't know.
word. Just about. I'm trying.
Ah, yeah, and a lot of kind of parallel harmonic progression, right? Just kind of moving the shapes around the keyboard and um yeah, it's kind of crunchy as well. It's
Yeah, I
buttery.
love it. It's quite lush.
Call it crunchy peanut butter. I don't know that that actually works. Um, and how did you end up choosing that? Like, why that track again, specifically? I think you mentioned kind of making some interludes, but kind of revisit, I guess your process of just choosing in general, um, the tracks, that you're going to throw together for this particular album in with the context of this in there.
Yeah, that's a great question. So for me, in the album, I didn't want just a program that worked well intellectually. For me, I wanted something that really I flowed naturally.
Flows,
Yeah,
yeah, it flowed.
exactly. Flowed naturally from start to finish. So I wanted every single piece to feel connected to the piece that came before and the piece that comes after.
Hmm.
And this one comes in between Une barque sur l'océan and Oiseau triste. And
Hmm.
whereas Une barque sur l'océan, for me, it was representative of this wide expanse of water. We're very much on the
Which
outside.
is
We
the
have
previous one that we listened to, part of at
exactly.
least, yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, exactly. We've got this immense open ocean in front of us, and we're exposed to all these like very changing elements.
Hmm.
The piece that comes after is very introverted. Oiseau triste is about sad birds being plaintively singing in one of the hottest summer days in the forest. This is Ravel's own description of the piece. So I
Mm.
needed a piece that kind of bridged um, the kind of very extroverted character of Une barque sur l'océan, which is still quite reflective in a way, but it's still quite, outdoorsy kind of, to something that felt a lot more intimate. And because both of the intimate nature and meditative nature of the piece, but also the fact that both tonally and harmonically it matched so well, Une barque sur l'océan. I think it even it's in the same key or something. So
Mm.
it gels so perfectly. I'm not saying exactly in the same key because it's kind of pantonal, but you know what I mean.
Hmm.
Um, so it's sensorially fits very well. And that's the approach I used to generate all the suites in my album. I did make some decisions sometimes whereby I thought something would work, but then it didn't. So, for example, I thought that the minuet on the name of Haydn might work between the Beethoven Polonaise and the rest of the album because it's a piece by Ravel and it harks back to the classical era. But then I tried it and it really didn't work. So I didn't want anything that worked intellectually only. I wanted it to be a feast for the senses, let's say.
Mm.
So that's kind of my guiding approach.
Mm. I was just curious also on the one we just listened to. Is the chord at the front basically the same as the one at the end? Like, or is it
So the
basically the
one at the
same?
end is even more crunchy.
Okay.
Um,
But is it
yeah,
it's the same um similar? Are there similar chords or no?
yeah. So the root is C sharp in
Mm-hmm.
both chords, but
Okay.
the first chord is a C sharp major seven kind of. Um,
Okay.
Whereas the last chord it doesn't have a seventh, but it does have pretty much all the other notes.
Okay.
It's a very crunchy chord, so
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah, I had that. It very much had the feeling like, in traditional harmonic theory, you have the tonic chord,
Yeah,
and then, you start at the tonic and you return to the tonic.
yeah.
And what I felt in that one was that in a lot of music, even like jazz music, you can feel that kind of like I'm returning to a tonic triad. You know what I mean? Like it's the three. Even if you add the other notes, there's this feeling of okay, we got a C major chord here at the beginning, we got a C major chord here at the end, and I felt like there was like a tonicization of the larger chord in that one. Like
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
return to the chord, not just the triad, but the full chord, starts and finishes. So it's interesting, but it's still a little bit of a variation. Yeah.
Yeah,
They're
it
they're
does feel
both kind
more
of
stable at the end.
extensions.
Mhm.
All right. Okay. Let's go ahead and get another track up here. So next one would be uh Vaille de Clocher.
Vallée des Cloches,
You
yeah.
say it. Yeah. The Valley
The bells.
of the what?
It's the Valley of the Bells.
Of the bells. Oh, okay. Great. Yeah, anything about this particular track before we take a listen?
Sure. So it's interesting because there are different sort of interpretations about where this valley of the bells might be.
Mm,
So Ravel tells us that it was inspired by hearing the bells of Paris at midday. But
mm,
then I think it was Vlado Perlmutter who said that it's actually for him it's like a Helvetic um, landscape with cowbells. So somewhere in Switzerland with a valley, and
mm,
then you hear the cowbells in the distance. For me, it's actually sort of South Asia, and what I
mm,
imagine is bells from temples. There might be Buddhist or Hindu temples.
mm,
It feels very oriental, and there's certainly something quite hypnotic about them in the way
mm,
that, yeah, bells in a temple might feel. So, yeah, I'm
mm,
interested to see what listeners make of this actually.
mm. It actually makes me think of the line from the Beatles song. Do you know which one I'm thinking about? So there's a
Is that Eleanor Rigby or something?
no, Till There Was You, and so there were bells
Oh,
in
yeah.
the hills, but I never heard them ringing. And it's actually kind of funny now that I think about it. I wonder how many times this reference has been used of kind of like the bells just in this sort of natural place, which is kind of like what you're saying. It sounds like it's a nice concept, but it doesn't actually have a super concrete, where were the bells coming from? Was it a church? Was it cowbells? Was it some sort of, monastery or something like that? So it's interesting how you can have sort of a conceptual idea that sounds very romantic, but
Mm.
I have literally been on hikes in the mountains where you come across a bunch of cows and they're wearing cowbells, and uh, it's not necessarily that romantic. It's just kind of it's like ding, ding, ding. But they are bells in the hills. All right, let's take a listen. Let's all decide what we think what we think Ravel was thinking of in this case, then here we go. Mm, yes, I feel that it, has has this piece ever been modified for like orchestra or no?
Not by the composer himself.
Hmm.
So there have been some later orchestrations. Um, I think I know of two. I can't recall the exact name of the composers,
Hmm.
but he himself didn't orchestrate this one.
Yeah, I was going to say I mean, it's almost a piece it's very suited for the piano in a lot of ways. And the only other, I mean, trying to do it on a guitar or, whatever, any other single instrument or using that type of voice seems quite difficult. Um, but or orchestra might work. But it really does. I mean, we've got piano tuners in our audience here. Like, I feel like it really features the piano and it almost explores every single facet of how the piano could be thought of as a bell. You know,
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
like
it is at the end of the day a percussion instrument.
yeah, exactly. Right.
And you're right.
Yeah.
I was gonna
I
say,
feel the hammers hitting the
mhm.
strings much more like like the, that ball in the center of a bell, as opposed to you know, the way that you traditionally think of hammers and strings in a piano.
Yeah, and also he makes really good use of the different registers. Uh,
Hmm.
so like the really growly, brassy sounds. Then yeah, just the spacing, everything is just so masterly written. Like always with Ravel, he's just really good. He's just really good at writing for piano and also
Hmm.
orchestrating. So he really,
Mm.
really is a master.
Yeah. And after all of our sort of thoughts about what kind of bells, it seems almost like an exploration of bells in general. Like, hey, how many different kinds of bells could you imagine? And my son and I are reading the C.S. Lewis series, the Narnia series. Did you ever read those?
No, I think I watched one of the films once, but I haven't
Okay.
actually read it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, for anybody who's not familiar, I think most people maybe at least heard of it. It's like these children enter this magical other world, called Narnia, where just, things are a little bit different and time passes differently, and there's different types of creatures and things like this. But, Narnia has these different regions, you go through these different areas and they have their, maybe there's the dwarfs in this area or, this kingdom of these type of people. And it felt just like a world that you could enter, like, oh, we entered the Valley of the Bells, right? And you started in this clock shop, where all the different alarm, all the different, it was 12 o'clock and all the clocks and they started ringing in all the different ways. And then you went into this other world where it's kind of somber and solemn. And it feels very cinematic. It felt very cinematic to me and also um, like situational. Like you were
Hmm.
in brought into different environments as the tones and the timbre
Yeah, I
changed.
love your description. I think it's so yeah, it's spot on. But what do you think? Do you think does it feel like a city to you? Because to me, it feels so like wow, like it feels like we're in a grand expanse of nature somehow.
Hmm. Yeah, to me, it felt like you were traveling through a whole world. Like I said,
Mhm.
and it for me, it represented a journey. I was thinking if
Yeah.
you made like a music video, right? You would there would be times where it did feel very, even though there's a lot of sound, it felt kind of from the perspective of a solitary journeyer or set of
Mhm.
sojourners. It just and you're with your little crew and you're just in the mountains, or there's a city full of people, but you're overlooking it, and you're just
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
like, there's the city and you're hearing the bells down there or something. Yeah. But definitely traversing through, oh, hey, we're on a boat, we're on the ocean, and then we're in the mountains, and then, at this part where it's kind of spooky, and this part is, exciting. The sun's out, it's dark and cloudy, it's raining, just kind of going through these different places. That was kind of the way I thought about it.
Yeah,
That's why I
it's
wanted
very
to
special.
listen to the whole thing because at the beginning, I thought, oh, it's a clock shop,
Mm,
and all the bells are going off at the same time. And because there were things that sounded resonant, but then there were like dissonances that came in, and that made sense. Okay, because this clock is in this key and this one is in that key, so they're all ringing. And then once it changed from that, I was like, oh, well,
mm,
now we're out of the clock shop. Now we're into a different place, but we're still, I think the title and our discussion of it really forced me to like continue
to
to
listen,
want to
yeah.
listen to it
Yeah.
and go, what is this Valley of the Bells that we're speaking of? Where, what happens there? Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah,
That's
I
why I
love
wanted to listen to the whole thing.
that. Mm.
Cool. Um, so so this is your first album. What's next for you? Are you even thinking about that? I mean, do you think about my next albums or performances or the coming years, you want to continue to focus on Ravel or, you know, things that are similar or maybe go in different directions?
Yeah, I mean, what's immediately next for me, I'm actually performing this program in just under 2 weeks in Morocco. So
Mm,
I've never brought this program to Morocco before since the album was released. So it'll be a really exciting thing to actually show it to a Moroccan audience and see what they make of it. But in terms of yeah, my next project, I mean, I'm so like busy at the moment with like pursuing random interests.
hmm
Um, I do curate a concert series at the moment. And yeah, that ties on a little bit about what you said at the beginning about some of the work I do that's a bit more, let's say, grounded in the world we live in and
hmm
grounded in, let's say, artistic responsibility and so on. Because we try to do work that empowers young musicians and raises standards of pay and so on. So
Mm,
that's been also a focus of mine in the last few months. And I'm also actually kind of exploring that sort of more wider charity sector as well, not necessarily in music, but also in things like global health and pandemic preparedness and things like that. So yeah, it's interesting. I'm kind of following my passions, let's say, and that takes me in a lot of different directions. Musically, I'm listening to whatever tickles my fancy. And I have a million different ideas for a million different albums. But as you probably know from talking to a lot of guests and from your own experience, making an album is a really long process and it's quite onerous in all sense of all senses of the term. Um, so yeah, I'm trying to leave myself a little bit more room to see which exact direction am I going to take next. If I'm making an album, will it be an exploration of the intimate world of Schubert, maybe using historical keyboards, or are we doing in a completely different direction? And are we doing a concept album centered around smells and like sensory experiences or something like that? So,
mm.
as you can tell, I've got a lot of ideas, but probably not enough time to be honest.
Yeah, that happens to the
Yeah,
best of us. Um, okay, that sounds fun. Let's go back to talking about the album.
yeah.
And yeah, and if let's just talk about the piano itself as an instrument, from a technical perspective. I mean, I'm sure it sounds like you've had access to acoustic pianos for pretty much your entire musical career, so that's wonderful. Um, what do you have access to these days? Do you get a nice piano in your apartment or house, or, is it exclusive to go to some third party location to practice and play? Or tell us about your relationship with the instrument, us being piano technicians and whatnot. Yeah.
Sure, I can talk a little bit about the piano I recorded the album on actually, because that's quite
Please.
interesting. So I recorded in a venue called Wirestone, which is quite actually a very widely used venue for some of actually the biggest names in the industry. So I felt a bit like an imposter going there after I heard all the big names that recorded there. But the hall, it's a full concert hall that is no longer active as a performance venue and is only used for recordings. It has two Steinways.
How do you spell the name of it again?
So
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Wystone.
Okay. Got
It's
it.
in Wales.
Okay.
Yeah,
Just wanted to like get the context right. Okay.
of course. So it has two Steinway grand pianos, I think Model D, and one of them is from 2008, and the other one is from 2018. And actually, they're quite different beasts in terms of instruments. So the 2008 has got this wonderful mellow kind of sound that is, yeah, very luscious, but very kind of soft and I don't want to say muted, but it's definitely got that rounder quality to it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the 2018 piano, it's a very bright instrument. So we had these two completely different instruments to choose from. And Adam Binks, the recording engineer and label owner who was doing my recording with me, really recommended the 2008 one because it suited so much the character of the album. And I tried both, and I saw the huge difference between them, and I completely agreed with him that the 2008 was a fantastic instrument, and not only that, but it was perfectly suited for the sort of meditative, reflective sort of aura of the album, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And then in terms of the technicians we had with us, Phil Kennedy, did a really fantastic work just assisting us with the tuning in between the different sessions we had. We recorded over 2 days, but as all the piano technicians here listening will know, you need to have a technician pretty much every 3 hours to tune and do last minute adjustments because
Mm-hmm.
the tuning does change a lot across a
Mm-hmm.
session. And so we're very lucky to have him here. And yeah, so that's the wonderful instruments I recorded on, and I think you can really hear the character that a piano brings to the recording. Funnily enough, one of the tracks for a story I can tell you later if you like was recorded on a different piano, but the recording engineer Adam Biggs was very, very particular as to what piano it must be so that it's exactly the same sort of character as an instrument, because recording it on a piano with a different personality would have completely thrown off the vibe of the album and completely just stuck out. So that's the history behind the piano in the recordings. Now, at home, I have two pianos. I have a baby ground Squire and Longston.
One moment. I was gonna do a little screen share here. Because I found the website here, right? Wystone. And then this is Wystone pianos. And then I feel like I only see oh wait. So we have what is this? Are these the ones or no? Or are these sort of different?
There's two pianos. There's an old one and a newer one. I don't
Okay.
know if they're both listed. I might have
Okay.
gotten the dates wrong, but there's one that's older than the other,
One that's
basically.
older than the other. Yeah,
Yeah,
this one
exactly.
says 1995. Okay, so
Oh yeah, it might have been.
three Model Bs. So a 1995 and a 2011. And then this one, New Steinway D 2011. And then there should be a third one, right?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
didn't see a third one in the whole. We only saw the two. So yeah, I must have gotten the dates wrong.
that's
But
fine.
I must have played on the 1995 then.
Yeah.
And it was indeed reconditioned, and it was in stunning condition when I played on it. It was really, really pleasant. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, very cool. Yeah, it's interesting they have a little page for their pianos on here. It's great. Okay, go ahead. Yeah, so your personal.
Yeah, I have two pianos at home. I have a Squire and Longson baby ground, which is from the 40s, but have been also reconditioned. It's got quite a nice, also rounded tone. But it is, I mean, it is still an old instrument. So, you know, it has its own character and quirks. And then for most of my practice, I actually use a Casio PX870, I think, if I'm getting the numbers right, that I use with headphones so that I don't bother my neighbors so much.
Right.
But if I have to prepare for a very important performance, in Oxford, I have access to other pianos in colleges and so on. But I have to say, it is always a rough transition coming out of music college, because at Guildhall, we had the best possible instruments, and we kind of take it for granted as, you know, piano students. We have the best instruments and then 2 full-time piano technicians who, you know, take care of every instrument so well. And then you're out in the world and you have to get your own instrument, and yeah. But
it's
yeah,
so weird. I mean, it's the weirdest thing about pianos is that, you know, the best ones cost so much, and then the people that can afford them are not the people that can play them. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's
it's
like,
often the
oh, I
case.
just got out of music school, not raking in millions of dollars yet, you know? Like, and, you know, meanwhile, some doctor who can play chopsticks has like the piano you're supposed to have. It's just not quite
Yeah.
right.
Although you can get lucky sometimes. I mean, I heard some stories of friends who have been lucky and kind of received the piano as a gift from someone who
Patron.
wanted to give it to, yeah, wanted to give it to a piano student, because they didn't have any use for it, and they thought it's a shame that to have it sitting there. So yeah.
Yeah, maybe that's something. So there's, you know, there's a little donate a piano sites, and I've actually heard, we've had other guests on the show, a gentleman who had, well, actually, I think he got a Latin Grammy for one of his recent albums, and he had said that there was something, yeah, or some older gentleman who had a piano and he wanted it to go to some deserving artist, and it was in his will, and he had passed, and somehow, you know, they found that they had reached out to a couple people, asked them a few questions, and they didn't know why they were asking it, but they, you know, and he got this piano, right? I feel like I feel like there's a market, or like a the situation is ripe there for just
Mm,
this very situation. Wealthy people with nice pianos, because there are literally wealthy people with nice pianos, people with technicians, lots of technicians with it, especially if you're operating in like New York or a major city like
yeah.
we do, where they're just like, it doesn't match the, you know, or we need something, you know, somebody's like, we need another couch in here. I'm sorry, we'll have to get rid of the
Yeah.
piano. And
Yeah, there should be a
there could be
matching
like a
website.
not-for-profit where it's just like, okay, and you have artists who are, maybe they apply, and, you know, they get vetted by
Mm.
some board, and you go,
There's
okay, here
a
you go, let's match them up.
there's a business idea or a charity idea.
Gotta do it. Gotta do it.
Mhm.
Um, okay, well, thanks for sharing about that. Yeah, that's cool, your experiences. Well, we'll be wrapping up here pretty soon with the show, as we do. And just want to make sure you have a moment to share, you know, any final words of wisdom, some links, you know, where you want to send people, stuff like that.
Sure. I mean, if anyone wants to keep up with my activities, I am on various social media. So I am on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. I post most regularly to Instagram, but I will post my most important concert dates and so on Facebook as well. You can also find me on my website by typing my name onto Google. It will come into the first link. So that's aidalahlou.com. And
And
yeah,
we'll
it
spell
was,
that out if somebody's just listening. I with 2 dots over it, whatever you want to say that is. D-A. And then Lahlou is Lahlou.
that's right. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and also thanks to everyone for listening.
Okay, wonderful. Well, we wish you the best of luck with this, and it's been fun to share. I'll wrap up the program, and We'll see everybody again soon. So yes, this has been the end of another musical journey here at Piano Tech Radio Hour. Thank you, of course, to Aïda Lahlou for joining us today, as well as our audience of live participants. As always, we are brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses. That is cutting edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. If you joined us today by signing up for this session independently, hey, make your life more convenient. Subscribe to Piano Tech Radio Hour, just $16 a month. You get the recording of today's session in our member area, as well as automatic registration for each week's new session. You could sign up at bit.ly/join PTRH. That's bit.ly/join PTRH. Don't forget about the podcast, the Substack, the socials, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Sign up for the email list at pianotechniciansmasterclass.com with just your name and email. And with that, we will bid you adieu. Happy Mother's Day weekend. And we'll see you again next week. Aïda, jump back on the link and we'll do a quick wrap up. All right. Bye-bye,
Great.
everyone.